The date is October 25th, 1944, the Battle of Leyte Gulf. This was not meant to be a legendary clash. It was meant to be a swift American victory. But for the small ships of Task Unit 77.4.3, known as Taffy 3, this was the morning the world ended. They were sailing in a vast, empty stretch of the Philippine Sea. Their ships were thin-skinned, lightly armed, and built for speed and submarine hunting, not for battleship warfare. Their mission? Provide air cover for the invasion of Leyte. The American High Command had made a fatal error. Convinced by a masterful Japanese decoy, the powerful American Third Fleet, the true shield of the invasion, had been lured hundreds of miles north. They were chasing ghosts. This left the American invasion forces utterly exposed. Taffy 3 and its handful of destroyers were the only thing standing between the entire invasion force and annihilation. They were a single sheet of tissue paper guarding the throat of the Allied operation. Steaming toward them came the most powerful surface fleet Japan could muster, Center Force, led by Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita. At its heart was the colossal Yamato, the largest battleship ever built. The comparison defied reality. The weight of a single broadside from the Yamato was greater than the total weight of the USS Johnston. Alongside her were 3 more battleships, 8 heavy cruisers, and a screen of 11 destroyers. It was 23 heavily armed warships against 7 tiny ships and their handful of escort screens. But the little destroyer, USS Johnston, had a captain unlike any other, Commander Ernest E. Evans, a Cherokee warrior known to his crew as Chief. At the ship's commissioning, he had famously promised, "This is going to be a fighting ship. I intend to go in harm's way, and anyone who doesn't want to go along had better get off right now." He was about to make good on that promise. The tropical dawn broke over Samar. At 0645, a frantic report crackled over the radio from a scouting plane. Enemy surface force sighted, 4 battleships, 8 cruisers, headed directly for us. Admiral Sprague, commanding the small unit, recognized the gravity of the situation instantly. They were facing the entire Japanese striking power. The first massive water-tower-high shell splashes appeared on the horizon, their colored dye marking the impossible distance they had traveled. Quote, "It was like giants throwing rocks." Or similar quote. The call went out to the task unit. "General quarters, prepare to engage the enemy." But Commander Evans didn't wait. He didn't wait for the order. He knew the small carriers could never outrun this force. He immediately ordered flank speed and a sharp turn directly toward the Japanese battle line. The battle to save the Pacific was now an unplanned, desperate, and magnificent suicide mission.
The Japanese fleet was steaming in its perfect battle line, confident in the inevitable slaughter. But Commander Evans, on the bridge of the USS Johnston, refused to follow the script. He knew the slow carriers wouldn't last 5 minutes. The only chance was to attack. Evans needed to get within 10,000 yards to ensure a hit. The ship entered a storm of 18-inch and 8-inch shell fire, dodging and weaving. It was a dance of death. At a mere 9,000 yards, the command came, "Fire all tubes." 10 Mark 15 torpedoes were launched, running true toward the main line of heavy cruisers. The torpedoes struck the heavy cruiser Kumano, tearing open her bow and instantly taking her out of the battle line. The effect was immediate. The Japanese battle formation, expecting an easy kill, was suddenly forced to maneuver, disrupting their perfect line of fire. Chaos was sown. But the small destroyer had been spotted. Before it could complete its escape, 3 massive 14-inch shells from a Japanese battleship slammed into the Johnston. The hits were crippling, the bridge was ravaged, the gyro compass destroyed, and the primary forward gun turret was ripped off its mounting. The ship was shaking apart. We were blind and bleeding. Crippled but not broken, Evans ordered the ship to immediately begin the smokescreen maneuver. This was the destroyer's secondary mission, but now it was their most vital. The destroyers and escorts began pouring heavy oil smoke across the ocean, creating a dense, impenetrable fog bank. Admiral Sprague, seeing the sacrificial charge work, utilized every trick in the book. He ordered his escort carriers to turn into the wind, launching every available plane, even those armed with light anti-submarine bombs and depth charges. The pilots were ordered to make dummy bombing runs and use smoke to mimic larger aircraft. The combination of the immediate, unexpected torpedo attack and the thick smoke screen completely confused the Japanese command. They could no longer see their primary targets, the slow carriers, and, believing they had encountered a much larger, more determined fleet, their discipline began to break down. The Johnston had bought Taffy 3 precious minutes, costing them the battle, but giving the rest of the unit a chance to survive. Crippled, deafened, and running on backup power, the Johnston should have sunk hours ago. But Commander Evans, now directing his ship from the aft steering station, found one remaining working gun. He continued to pepper the immense Japanese cruisers with whatever ammunition they had left, refusing to break off the fight. The Johnston's stand inspired the rest of Taffy 3. The other destroyers and escort ships rushed forward, laying down continuous smoke and launching their own torpedoes. The USS Hull, under Commander Kinberger, took devastating hits but pressed its attack until it was a floating wreck. Even the jeep carriers were fighting back. Their small crews, facing the giants, fired their minimal defensive guns in defiance. The collective chaos, the smoke, the torpedo threats, and the constant harassment by the few remaining aircraft forced the Japanese to continue zigzagging, slowing their advance and spoiling their aim. The Johnston had expended its fury. Out of torpedoes, out of maneuvers, and bleeding oil and steam, she faced the heavy cruiser Yamato. The Japanese closed the distance, delivering the final, overwhelming barrage. The order was given to abandon ship. The USS Johnston sank at 10:10 a.m. Only 141 men survived. Commander Evans, refusing to leave the bridge of his ship, was last seen waving off a lifeboat, his fate sealed by the ship he loved. He was lost, but the fleet was saved. And then came the moment that defies explanation. Admiral Kurita, the commander of the massive Japanese fleet, had finally broken through the smoke and decimated the small American screen. The path to the undefended Leyte Gulf was wide open. Yet, at 09:25 a.m., he gave the order that stunned his own commanders: withdraw. Why did he turn back? Kurita believed he had been fighting the main U.S. Third Fleet, not a collection of lightly armed carriers. The ferocity of the destroyer attacks, the constant air assaults, and the persistent fog had completely shattered his estimate of the American power. He had been successfully fooled by a ghost fleet. The sacrifice of the USS Johnston in Taffy 3 was the hinge upon which the Battle of Leyte Gulf turned. They had defeated the largest battleship fleet in history using sheer audacity and the threat of technology. Commander Evans was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. The legacy of the tin can that fought like a battleship remains one of the greatest, most impossible stories of naval heroism, a testament that courage, when applied systematically, can always defeat overwhelming force.